What is going on, Dragon Ball fans? Welcome back to another Dragon Ball fan manga review, where today we're going to be reviewing the fan manga entitled Dragon Ball Multiverse, which of course is a fan manga set within its own timeline involving characters from both Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. But the overall concept of Dragon Ball Multiverse involves fighters from different quadrants and parallel worlds in which come together for this grand multiverse battle to determine which universe and team is superior than the rest. And for many years now, I've been reviewing Dragon Ball fan concepts and mangas, so today we're going to be diving further into this manga chapter to further understand the gravity and nature of Dragon Ball Multiverse. So we begin with Dragon Ball Multiverse manga chapter number 2, exactly where we left off, with one of the overall tournament holders having to say Universe 10 was the one with the most competitors and all the Nameks, but one just gave up, and that is a lot, in which the Namekian says there will be many others as soon as a really powerful fight takes place, in which one of the tournament holders says, well, we'll keep going anyway. So next up, we're going to have 17 from universe number 14 against Akil from universe number 15, in which we see this female character and she says, what? Already? In which she also says, but I will kill my newborn, just give me a few more hours, because she's waiting to give birth. And we see inside of the womb, there's an actual creature, and she says impossible, but it's a forfeit, so it actually counts as a forfeit, as 17 is very pleased as they announce 17 wins, and him having to say, well, that was quite easy, in which the tournament holder says, we could have postponed his fight, in which the other says, no, this guy was an ass to me, so I can't bear him, which is kind of funny. But next up, they say, the next fight shall be the South Kaioshin from universe number 1 against Birder from universe number 8. So it's Birder versus the South Kaioshin, and this fight ends up really fast because we see how Birder says, I am the fastest being in the universe, in which the Southern Supreme Kai says, oh yeah, and he punches, actually no, he kicks Birder so hard in the gut that Birder goes down. And it's kind of funny because in Dragon Ball, Birder was always the one to say, I am the fastest, in which the Kaioshin says, the fastest, huh? In your universe maybe, but not here, in which it is announced South Kaioshin from universe 1 wins. Next fight, Majin Buu from universe number 11, and we see Deborah and Babidi Go My Majin versus Bujin from universe number 6. And we see how right then and there, once the fight even starts, Buu goes on the offensive, and Buu being Buu, we see how he punches this guy straight in the mouth, and we see how this guy says he attacked without warning, you'll pay for that. Power of illusion. And then we see how Buu says, ooh, magic, because there's a bunch of clocks all around him, and Buu goes, I can do that too, watch this. And we see how all of a sudden, this guy is looking at Buu, and he transforms all of these clocks into candy and junk food and donuts and ice cream and lollipops, which is classic Buu. And then Buu punches him. And then the guy goes, he's too fast and he's very strong. I'll have to use my energy bonds maximum power. So it looks like this being is using some sort of like astro string to tie up Buu, in which begins to cut Buu into pieces, in which this being thought he won, and then Majin Buu automatically pulls himself back together, which is really cool because I don't know about you guys, but that one scene where Majin Buu got sliced reminded me of the movie Hellraiser, for anybody out there who's a horror fan. And then we see Majin Buu says, you suck, and he punches him right in the face, which I found to be awesome. And then they say Majin Buu from universe 11 wins, and we see how Bojack is mad. Bojack says, wow, he lost, how lame. With Babidi having to say, bravo, my Buu, you worked very well. And then over on the side, we see future Trunks, and Gohan having to say, are you the same Trunks who came to us from the future? In which we see Trunks says, son Gohan, yes, we also fought Cell together and you destroyed him. You've grown in a very different way. We meet again, but this time I am an elder. I am the elder. And that's when Gohan says, I feel like this whole story happened like 30 years ago, but it's a lot less for you, right? And Trunks having to say, yeah, about 10 years, yes. By the way, I have someone I would like you to meet. And we see Android 16, in which Trunks says, I found him in the ruins of Dr. Gero's laboratory. Mother put him back together. Number 16 is a big help in rebuilding our world. And Gohan having to say, 16, you saved our world too, you know. I'm really happy to see you again. And 16 having to say, Trunks told me we were both willing to do anything in order to protect the future. So it's really cool from my point of view to see future Trunks and Android 16 finally finally have a moment to where not only is 16 alive, but he knows of Gohan. He's a benevolent being, he's kind, and he's working with Trunks. So for the first time, we see Trunks working with Android 16, and I've grown to like this manga more. And then we see how Gohan says, so you're a challenger, in which 16 says, yes, I didn't want to, but at first, there's several Son Gokus here, and I would like to kill one. So he does have the intention on killing at least one Goku, in which we see how Gohan just pretty much gulps, and he's like, well, good luck there, and he moves and he goes off, and it looks like he bumps into Videl and saying, I saw an old friend, Trunks from the future, you know, against Cell, and her having to say, what are you saying? And Gohan having to say, we've talked to him about an hour ago. So it's kind of weird, and then all of a sudden, Gohan got it confused because the other Gohan arrives, and he says, whoa, I'm in the wrong place, because Gohan thought that was his Videl. So we see two Gohans interacting, in which one Gohan says, I'm really sorry, with the other one having to say, it's nothing, I think, and we see Videl blushing. So we're about to have ourselves a bukkake here, you get what I'm saying? So we see how the other Videl comes by, and she says, what are you doing here? So it's kind of funny to see Gohan interact with the wrong Videl, and we see how Goten, once again, meets another Goten. He says, you're identical to us here, huh? And we see how everyone from our universe interacts with the polar opposite of the others, and in which case we see how someone says, so weird, why did those Vargas choose our own two universes if they're identical? In which we see everyone meeting each other. Trunks is meeting Trunks, Goten meets Goten, we see Piccolo meeting Piccolo, Pan meeting Pan, and we see the other Pan having to jump on top of Goku and saying, at last I meet you, and we see Goku says, whoa, two Pans, like that's pretty cute, and in which he says, in your universe, I'd be dead again, and then we see someone emerge. And that person clearly says, clearly our two universes separated from the moment I appeared, and we see Vegito emerge. So the only difference of that universe is instead of having Goku and Vegeta be present, instead it's Vegito when he never separated. And he emerges by saying, how did you beat Buu if you and Vegeta didn't fuse together in order to become me? And we see how Goku and Vegeta are like, whoa, this is nuts. And we see how Goku says, Buu trapped us in, you know, his head, and how did you do that? And Vegito says, oh, I see. And that's when Goku says, actually, and then right as he's talking, the announcer says, next fight is Tinder from universe number 19 against Oob from universe number 18, with one of the contenders having to say, careful, my radar is sensing something crazy about this group, use full strength from the beginning, with the obvious contender having to say, yeah. And once the fight begins, we see how Oob says, at last, I will show you a little bit of my power, and in which the contender says, you think you can scare us with that crazy, gigantic telekinesis power of yours? And he unleashes like these guns, right? And it's pretty terrifying because for someone who doesn't have any weapons, this guy pulls out rocket launchers and grenades, and he starts launching shots at Oob. And Oob is just like, is that a joke? And Oob is like moving right through all of the blasts, right through all of the rocket launcher shots, and he's so fast, he's able to outmaneuver all the bullets, and he shows up right in front of this dude and using his strength to push him back, and in which he does, and Oob having to say, huh, I mean, his armor weighs like a ton, how did that even happen? And in which we see later on how the blasts are raining down upon Oob, with Oob having to say homing missiles, his electronics have better reflexes than he has, so he shoots away all of the blasts, and it's pretty much a done deal, with Oob having to say, very powerful and concentrated explosion chemicals, good thing I didn't let myself get touched. And we see how this dude pulls out like some sort of like a knife, some sort of like giant blade from his arm, and his attack is actually called God's Blade. So he shoots down upon Oob, and it split the entire ball that Oob was on. So this energy blade pretty much did lots of damage as it cut right through, but then Oob's arm got cut off. We see how Oob's arm got cut off, and we see how this contender says, this blade is extendable and forged from a different dimension, it cuts through anything, and in which we see Oob blast this dude out of nowhere with like this ferocious attack, and he picks up his arm, and it's really brutal if you ask me, and in which we see how Oob gets back to the others, and he says, quick, can you fix this? And we see how Vegeta says, you weren't careful enough, and Oob having to say, that's not what I'm asking, so he's arguing, he's saying, please help me, and then we see how Goku saying, well, don't we have a sensu? Asked the Namekian. Everyone's pretty much like arguing, and in which we see how one of the contenders says, you killed Tender, you killed him. And so Oob accidentally killed him, and in which Babidi comes out of nowhere and he says, I can heal your arm. And then he says, but it won't be for free. So this little sleazeball is by the fence and he says, I'll heal your arm, but it won't be for free. And Oob having to say, ha, you can't even do it. It's your Majin Buu who will, right? And in which we see Piccolo says, we're not interested in your deception and your deceitful proposal, in which Oob says, I'm ashamed my powers came from you. So Oob is directly talking to Babidi because he knows, remember, Oob is the reincarnation of Buu. He goes, I'm ashamed that my powers came from you. And Babidi says, too bad, just keep bleeding then. In which he tells Buu, Buu, I didn't tell you to heal him. In which the other Majin Buu, the other bigger Majin Buu comes by and he fixes Oob's arm, in which case he says, I did it only to hassle Babidi, or maybe because you have a little bit of Buu in you, or is it the fact that all of you exist as absorbed into me that makes me feel close to you? And Goku says, even me? And Buu having to say yes. So this version of Super Buu is the variation in which Majin Buu had absorbed everybody. There is nobody left. Even Goku was absorbed by this Majin, in which he says, everything that exists and contains some power in my universe is now in me. So we see how they're trying to fix up the arena, they're trying to fix up the giant ball that cracked, and in which they did, and then they go off and they say, Nail from universe number 10 against Recoome from universe number 8. And we see Nail and Recoome enter the arena, with Recoome having to say, Special Force, Ginyu, Recoome, and Nail is like, what the hell? And we see how Recoome charges him. Now again, this fight was pretty cool because it looked like a back and forth kind of contest with Nail trying to kick Recoome and Recoome having to try to punch Nail, and it was a back and forth thing until Recoome pretty much gave Nail the Recoome kick as he kicked them on down to the ground, with Recoome having to say, do you want some more? And then Nail powers up and he's staring at Recoome, and Recoome is wondering as to what the heck is going on, and then Nail charges him. But here's the thing, Nail hit Recoome so hard he busted his armor, he was breaking his armor, and this was one of the most intense fights of the beginning of this tournament, because then we see how Nail sticks his hand out and he completely blows Recoome away, in which right then and there we see how throughout the dust, throughout the smoke, we see how Vegeta even says, not powerful enough. And then the smoke clears and Recoome is there, he's battle damaged, and he says, not bad, that wasn't bad at all, but it's my turn now. Recoome Eraser Gun, and Recoome launches this Eraser Gun and tearing Nail's, left side of his body apart, like his arm is gone, he's dismembered, and Recoome grabs him and he picks him up and saying, no resistance, you're no different from the Namekians we slaughtered before. And then, just as slick as Nail was, he opened up his eyes and he shot these beams right through Recoome's chest, in which Recoome is gushing blood from his chest. We see how Nail says, you're not too cautious now, are you? He regrows his arm, he takes off his vest, and he's beginning to kick Recoome's ass, to the point where Recoome was down on the ground, and we see how he was stomping a hole within Recoome. He kept kicking Recoome in the heart until we see how Nail says, I can't take any risks, I'm out of energy, and 30, Nail wins. So Nail won just by slaughtering Recoome. He slaughtered Recoome, in which we see Vegeta says, it's a pity Nail didn't give us a hand against the commando, this commando on Namek, and him having to say, I wonder what he was doing instead of helping us. And in which case the next fight is Trunks from universe number 12 against Cooler from universe number 8, and in which Trunks shows up and he says, fate has a sense of humor, huh? In which Trunks becomes a Super Saiyan and saying, you are the only one of your family that I didn't kill, and I personally enjoyed that line so much. And then Trunks charges at Cooler, and we see how Trunks is kicking Cooler's ass, and we see how Cooler says, wait, it's a shame. And then he says, you're showing off, but I'm sure you're nothing without your weapon. And in which Trunks puts his weapon down, and we see how Trunks says, I only brought it here just for fun of the event. And we see how Cooler says, you're honest with me now, I will be too, so show me your real power. In which Cooler transforms into his final form, and Trunks having to say his wounds are healed, and he emits a lot more power, in which he does. Now it's final form Cooler versus Super Saiyan Trunks, and we see how Cooler kicks Trunks in the air, and Trunks having to say, you You are amusing me. But then Cooler blasts all of these rapid fire attacks and Trunks having to dodge them all. And we see how Cooler says, would he by any chance? And he goes back up in the sky, and instead of shooting the blast directly at Trunks, he rains it on down to the battlefield instead of hitting him, in which we see how the blasts are just about to hit everyone in the crowd, including the spectators, and we see how Trunks deflects that. And Cooler was very smart about this because we see how Trunks says, like I thought, the audience is protected, but Cooler shows up behind Trunks with his sword, and he tries to cut down Trunks, but Trunks grabs the sword with just 2 fingers, and he says, it's really a bad habit that it runs in your family. Are you tired of all your dirty tricks? And then we see how Trunks is taunting him, in which Cooler did the exact same thing as King Cold, but we see how Trunks punches Cooler so hard he actually goes through a little planet and onto his family, in which Trunks says, you're not even worth killing anymore, in which ultimately enough they declare Trunks as the winner. And we see how the ring announcers are saying as soon as the ring and the ground are reconstructed, the fight will begin. King Vegeta from universe number 10 against Vegeta from universe number 18. And we see how Gohan says, you don't want to fight against your father? And in which Trunks says that's himself, not his father. And Vegeta says, well, I don't give a damn about him. I'm trying to calculate when I'll be able to fight Kakarot. So he doesn't even care if he fights himself, in which we see how Vegeta and Vegeta get in the ring, and the older Vegeta says, what happened to your title? In which regular Vegeta says, you know, at home, I have no one to reign over. In which the other Vegeta says, was that brat who insulted me an hour ago yours? And he charges him, and Vegeta says, his mother didn't educate him well, so you're powerless. I have to thank Frieza after all. So he beats himself down and saying, nothing. You're nothing but a ghost of what I would have been if I stayed on that pitiful planet bearing my name. And in which he says, the others down there are what I'd like if I hadn't found my inner peace on Earth. In which the other Vegeta says, I thought growing a beard like my father would look ridiculous. You confirm it. You talk a lot, and now your tail is missing. And then we see how he like unleashes like this ball, and he's about to throw it up, in which we see the older Vegeta says, everyone close your eyes, no one look at the sky, otherwise you will outgrow the entire arena. And to our surprise, all the Saiyans cover their eyes, and we see how Vegeta becomes a great ape. And then Vegeta says, no one can defeat the king of all Saiyans, and Vegeta casually walks up and he kind of punches the gorilla once, and in which we see Great Ape Vegeta's coughing, and Vegeta looks at him and says, it's time to stop this little joke, in which he blasts Vegeta so hard, in which the other Saiyans are like shocked and they're embarrassed by this, in which the older Vegeta is saying, you can open up your eyes now, in which the Vegeta from universe number 18 wins. So he beat himself up effortlessly and saying, that was pretty much a joke. And we see the ancient Saiyans saying, the king lost, the enemies in this tournament seem to be much stronger than we imagined. But next up is Bardock from universe number 10 against Pan from universe number 18, and in which Bardock says, won't stop me from having some fun. And we see how Pan shows up, and we see how Bardock is like some brat, and Pan's like, you're my great grandpa. So it's kind of funny how Pan is looking at, you know, Bardock, and he's just like, whatever, like who is this little child? And Vegeta wakes up and he's like, ouch. And everyone's like looking at him like, what happened there, man? Like, Jesus. And Vegeta says, I lost against yourself? And then one of the Saiyans says Bardock is next and he's gonna save us the honor. And in which we see how Pan is smacking Bardock with the power pole, and in which she's, I mean, at first she jumps at him trying to hug him, and in which, like, you know, she's pushing Bardock back. This girl is so strong with her hugs, she's kind of pushing him back, and in which she smacks him with the power pole, and Bardock is trying to attack her, in which she pokes his eyes, she pushes him around, she even gets him in like the walls of Jericho, and we see how Bardock is like, I give up, and Pan's like, what, already? And then King Vegeta is like, that's enough, we're leaving. So the Saiyans finally understood that they in fact are leaving. So they had no role in staying here anymore, in which case they say, bring us back home. And one of the tournament holders is saying, but wait, don't you want to stay for the finals? Can we at least heal your wounds? And Vegeta having to say, no, we won't keep getting humiliated. And even the Namekians are saying, we're leaving too, but you won our match, in which one of the contenders says, and the Namekians are like, well, we won't go far, I'm sure we'll lose. So the announcer says, all of Universe 10 forfeits, Pan wins her match, Now it's time for Kakaroto from universe number 13 against Cat from universe number 6, and that's where the manga chapter closes off. So post your comments down below, guys. What are your overall thoughts on Trunks versus Cooler? What are your overall thoughts on the Saiyans having to forfeit? What are your overall thoughts on the Namekians having to leave as well? The overall chapter pretty much summarized every single universe, every single, respective team having to leave, and knowing the fact that they don't really make a difference in this tournament because they're fighting people that are way above them in terms of power, in terms of scaling, so they really can't make a difference, because what's the point of fighting when they understand themselves that they're really not going to go far? So post your comments down below, guys. Thank you all for watching. Once again, if you guys are Dragon Ball fans, don't forget to subscribe for more news, information, and updates. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to go ahead and slap a like down below. Tune back in for more, and I'll be seeing each and every single one of you guys down in the comment section below. Take it easy, guys, and have a great day. Peace.